Smoke your hog, get out your bib. Solid! Picking a rib. Out the keys to a barbecue and start picking a rib.
And it kept on picking.
Good for them, good for me and you, so let's start picking too. Old King Cole came out of a hole by picking a rib. Picking. Smoked a hog on a red outlaw, called it a barbecue. Say, stomping chicken, we've got a new creation. Say, you better start picking, cause barbecue's taking the nation.
Hey there, Nostril Heads. It's time for Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, where we pick a book off my shelf and flick through it. What else could that mean? I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and before we get into it, please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Now, this is the inaugural episode of Pickin' and Flickin' in the Nostril Zone, so if we have any video quality issues or sound issues, or if the table shakes too much, hopefully we'll be able to fix that in future episodes. And for our first flick of our first episode, I've picked One Dirty Tree by Noah Van Sciver, published by Uncivilized Books in 2018. Now, I picked this book because it's not very old, but it's not too new either. It's alternative, but it's not too weird or out there. A lot of the books on my shelf, they're going to be alternative comics, underground comics, things from the golden age, and, European comics, and, things that I think that probably Noah Van Sciver was really influenced by, as was I. And also, this is my favorite Noah Van Sciver book that I've read thus far. I don't know if that's how he feels about it, but that's how I feel about it. I think it's simple and it's brisk, but there's a lot of depth there, and it's funny and it's charming, and goddamn it, it's beautiful. So let's dive in and see if I pick gold for this first episode. Generally, I'm not a fan of autobiographical comics, but I won't hold it against this one because it really did capture my imagination. Much like this 19th century etching with Noah Van Sciver as a young boy sort of collaged in there, I think that is sort of capturing a little boy's imagination about dinosaurs and history and fossils, and that'll literally play into this story, but I think it also plays a thematic role in this story, like sort of ephemeral history becoming solidified like fossils, and the way the foundations of the past play a role in the present, and literally digging up ancient history. That's all very part and parcel of this book. Case in point, we start with this cast of characters, the Van Sciver family in 1994. This is really where about half this book takes place. He's got his parents at the top here, the children in order of birth. He grew up in a huge family, Mormon family, lower income, lower class. And this plays a huge role on who he would become, as evidenced by this particular work. I really like Jonah in the bottom right, doing the jerk-off hand motion. Interestingly, he's got Jenna here, married at 18, moved to Arizona. She's drawn in kind of silhouette here. It kind of represents that he doesn't really have any memory of her, but also, maybe that her absence casts kind of a looming shadow on the family, maybe. This is Ethan Van Sciver, who, the famous Comicsgate cartoonist and personality, apparently the more famous Van Sciver, who knew. Personally, I don't have a lot of sympathy for Comicsgate. I'm not a Comicsgate guy, but he's a very interesting and charismatic and intelligent guy, and he's definitely got insight into the comics industry. So I occasionally will check what he has to say when there's drama in the comics world. And then we've got Noah down here, his self-portrait as a child with big afro and goony glasses and this sort of slumpy posture. He's just so charming, the way he depicts himself. Speaking of charming, he's got this handsome little mustache here. He always depicts himself with this when he's sort of in narration mode. He probably cuts down on the amount that he has to draw a mouth as well. I wonder how much of a factor that is. But I was really disappointed when I sort of met him online and started interacting with him to find out, like, oh, what, he doesn't have that smart little mustache? What? Too bad. So the I guess thesis of this book is this house here, 133, or as his brothers would call it, one dirty tree, because of his twisted dead oak that was growing in front. And it's this kind of worn down, trashy piece of shit house. It's falling apart. And in concert with Noah, it's the protagonist of the story. And he does a good job conveying just how hectic it was to live in this piece of shit house. He shares a room with his two brothers, and the rotten floorboards give you splinters that your dad has to yank out. And upstairs in the attic, his brothers are obsessed with comics. He draws a Cyber Frog here, which was Ethan Van Sciver's character. I think it's still his character that he does comics about today. He was actually in DC for quite a while, but I don't really know anything about those kinds of comics. I guess he had a goth girlfriend that would give him photos of dead animals, and Noah seems quite traumatized by that. Down here we see Josiah. He didn't draw comics, but he would collect and read them. Unusually, even his father was really into comics. And Noah draws himself here with the Fantastic Four, saying, like, why's Spider-Man there? And he's like, that's a new Fantastic Four. That cover's by Arthur Adams. And he's like, why is the Hulk gray? The Hulk was originally gray. It's a long story. Go to your room. Like he's an idiot for not knowing. And Noah was into comics too, but he was more into cartoony comics, like Ralph Snart, which was published by Now Comics in the 90s. They published Ralph Snart and like Married with Children comics. I don't know. It was just kind of trashy comics. I used to read them too. But he also was reading Milk and Cheese and Bone and Ren and Stimpy. And he shows us some of the Ren and Stimpy-esque comics that he would make with his friend Brenton, his drawing buddy. I can definitely relate to this. Anyway, it makes sense given that he's a much more cartoony cartoonist. And now most of this book has to do with him growing up in this, rundown hovel where there was not enough food and too many kids, and he was kind of left to his own devices, but somewhat abusive household. There's even like dirty dishes in the bathtub, like so he doesn't want to take a bath. And him and his whole family were kind of pariahs in the town. This huge, poor, trashy Mormon family that lives in this garbage house. And this outsider status, it really leaves a scar on Noah, as we'll see. As an organizing structure to this story, Noah is always jumping between 1994 and 2014, 20 years later, where he's working on Fonte Bukowski, and things are really kind of picking up in his career. It's kind of a nice contrast because, in 1994, everything's kind of falling apart and crumbling, and, the floors are literally disintegrating beneath his feet. But in 2014, things are looking great for Noah. He's finishing up his breakthrough graphic novel. He's got this girlfriend, and they're living this sort of yuppie lifestyle in a nice gentrified apartment. And he's got this shitty service job, but he actually publishes Fante Bukowski in this book. It actually, he's working at the service job when he gets the call. Let's see if I can find it here. Go figure. I can't find it when I'm looking for it, but I'll show it when we get there. And so it really is a nice contrast between the downward slide and sort of the upward climb that's happening 20 years later. And so Noah in 2014 is in ascendance, but the past when his family was in descent, sort of lingers as a corrupting force in his soul, where, his past being poor and an outsider and, a small member of a big family, all of these things kind of threaten to bubble to the surface and corrupt him and literally turn him into a monster, as we'll see in this. And this is kind of exacerbated by the fact that he has this sort of normie girlfriend who's kind of striving and comfortable and, who sees sort of Noah's values and ambitions as kind of a quirk, but can't really understand, where he's coming from. We get some dinosaurs, and they're kind of like the innocence of childhood. We've got him here getting his first kiss and pretending to be a dinosaur and stomping around like a dinosaur and loving dinosaurs. But there's a dark shadow cast over his family in the character of his father, who had like a law practice, but just really had kind of too many damn kids and to hold it together, and he was this Mormon and wouldn't let his wife work, and it really just kind of crushed him and degenerated him and, turned him into a monster, really. And he's also bipolar. And so, as things are falling apart, he's like taking it out on this family in these sort of tyrannical fits of rage. And he's got his father depicted here, crushed by the weight of his family, and the loss of his dreams. This, I think, is a kind of important but maybe understated part where his girlfriend's got this kind of normie friend over, and she's talking about what a nice place they have, and Noah's saying like, oh yeah, my previous place was real cheap, and his girlfriend's like, yeah, it looked cheap too, like she was not impressed, but it's revealed that like the landlord took over an old hostel and really kind of gentrified it. And so I think this is kind of like, a metaphor for Noah, in that like, he's got this like, history and rotten foundation or whatever, but he can put a new facade on it. There's kind of a new birth to it. And then here he's got to explain to his girlfriend's friend why how he's a cartoonist and what it means to be a cartoonist. And you can see him literally becoming a monster as he's trying to explain it and feeling like a total loser. And his girlfriend even points out like, oh, he didn't graduate. He's a dropout. And she's like, well, do you make any money? He's like, well, no, I guess not. I can really relate to this. It's hard to explain what it means to be a cartoonist. People ask you, do you make money doing that? And it's like, well, yeah, kind of. It's hard to explain like, what your values are as a cartoonist. Like it's easy as a cartoonist to kind of recognize them, but it's a lot harder to justify them to someone who's normal, shall we say. And this is pretty much how the book goes. There's a lot of like great little stories about, growing up and, also like the weirdness of being a Mormon. And here's a spot where he actually gets his book published. This is what I was looking for earlier. He tells his service industry boss that, I got my book published. And he's like, oh, it's great. And make sure to clean out the tampon garbage in the washroom. And comics really are kind of an escape for Noah from this sort of dreary service industry life. And he contrasts that with back in 1994 with his brother, who also sort of used comics as an escape. He goes and works for DC. But Noah, that seems out of his reach when he's a kid, because he's more cartoony. He can't really get in even with the mainstream of comics, which are kind of an outsider thing. And we get some reflections on One Dirty Tree. There's the big dead tree. The front step is broken by a missionary's bike. That's kind of very symbolic. And even the sidewalk has a raccoon's footprint inside. It's just a shithole leaking and broken down. And, it's kind of like what his family was like at that point. And his father, he's got his dark cloud is like swirling, in like a storm at this point. He's being violent and eventually leads to him like walking out on them. And, it gets so bad that like, Noah as a kid is actually like secretly relieved that his father's gone. That's like how, chaotic and disruptive a presence his father was at the time. And that realization, it hurts him, right? Like you can see like he's left kind of empty here afterwards. And, you go back and he even says like, I feel like I can puke. It's fucking grim. And, eventually all this kind of trauma really kind of bubbles to the surface and the monster comes out and, on his birthday, he ends up breaking up with his girlfriend. And, it's very sad, but, it's also like he's kind of had a self-actualization. Then in the afterword, he goes and visits his brother, Ethan, and they walk those same old streets. They go back to the old neighborhood, and, he sees himself as a boy, and they encounter the house, and it's almost unrecognizable. The old, dead tree, that one dirty tree is gone. The whole house has a new facade. It's been completely renovated, and there's been a rebirth of this house. The house has been reborn as something new that, it still bears the foundation of its history, but it's not a prisoner of it. It's its own thing. It's a new thing. And, in a sense, Noah is the house. He's got this rotten history. He was dealt a bad hand, but, he's been able to kind of build himself up, and he's been able to carve a new life for himself. And I really like Noah's work. It's just so, I think I said it earlier, but it's just so charming and gosh darn beautiful. And here's a good example. I didn't really talk about sort of like the technique that he used or anything, but you can see looking at that, this is just like an acknowledgments page, but you can see how he's combining these sort of like flat colors with these more organic pencil crayons, and I've seen videos of how he does his coloring, where he's sort of using different layers and then kind of like digitizing it. So maybe you get this sort of wash in the background is sort of digitized, but then you've also got these, warmer, sort of more organic, softer pencils on top. And it really creates a nice interplay of line and color and material. And it's just a delight to read. And I have quite a few Noah Van Sciver books. Hold on, the table's going to shake here for a second. Here's Fonte Bukowski's Complete Fonte Bukowski. It's quite the tome. Another tome, Joseph Smith and the Mormons. This is really quite good too. All of these are great, but I still like One Dirty Tree the best. It just really does it for me. It just really kind of gets me. And I really recommend this book. As far as I know, it's still in print, or at least it's still available. It's cheap. You can probably get it for $10. It's nice. It's a breezy read. It's got a lot of meat to it still, and it feels good in your hand. It's a nice little book. It's just the right size, and I strongly recommend picking it up. Yeah, and so at the end of these things, I'm going to give a rating out of 5. And for One Dirty Tree by Noah Van Sciver, I give it 4.5 nostrils out of a possible 5 nostrils. So a real strong showing there. I wanted a strong showing for the first episode, of which we've pretty much arrived at the end of. So just so you know, I have a Patreon. You can sign up there. You can help support me and the making of these videos. You get access to all of my videos early, Pickin and Flickin in the Nostril Zone, and of course, Canonically Crumb. As well, you'll be thanked at the end of the show, as we'll see in a second. And if you don't care to do any of that, well, you can just flick off.
Smoke your hog, get out your bin, solid, digging a rib.